Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the first Spotlight on, a new series of video conversations from MIT Technology Review that will look at the cutting edge in a handful of high-tech industries. Today is Spotlight on gaming, where it is today as an industry and what opportunities gaming offers beyond games. Gaming is a giant of entertainment. I mean, that's not news to anybody. It's one of the most popular pastimes on the planet. The revenues from the gaming industry rival box offices and dwarf streaming services. Netflix's Reed Hastings a couple of years ago said that the blockbuster game Fortnite was his biggest competition, much more than other streaming services or other movie studios. And gaming grows year on year, but the last 6 months have given it an unexpected boost. As everyone was stuck at home with little else to do, gaming shot through the roof, more popular than ever. So now is as good a time as any to sit down and talk about what that means and where gaming is going and what opportunities gaming gives us beyond the obvious. And we have a great couple of speakers joining us today. First, we have Julie Shoemaker. She's Vice President of Revenue at Unity. And Unity is the world's most used platform by game creators to generate 3D virtual worlds, the worlds that you play games, you run around in. Pretty much every gaming platform has games that run on Unity, from mobile phones to the high-end consoles. So it's a massive platform that architects and manufacturers also use. It's not just content creators in games. So Julie can talk to us about what people are doing with Unity beyond games themselves. And second up, we have Brian Anthony. And Brian is the Associate Director of MIT Nano, and he's also Director of the Device Realization Lab at MIT. For 20 years, he's been inventing new kinds of device and technique for people to interact with physical systems. And he draws on mechanical, optical, and electrical engineering to build a range of applications, from medical devices to entertainment. And he's won an Emmy for his work in television. So welcome to both of you. First up, Julie, would you jump on and just say hi and let us know what you do at Unity and give us a little bit more information about Unity and why now is a great time to talk about games.
Good. Well, thanks for having me, Will, and great to work with Brian today. As a Southern Illinois University grad, I must say I'm quite humbled to be partnered with such an esteemed colleague. So yes, as Will noted, Unity Technologies is the world's leading platform for creating and operating interactive real-time 3D content. In essence, we empower creators across the globe. As a matter of fact, 1.5 million active monthly creators on the platform. And my responsibility at Unity is to take the 20 years of experience I have in the game industry, in essence, working for publishers to increase revenue opportunities and grow the business at Unity. As head of revenue for Operate Solutions, it's my job to have the developer success at core. And so how do we not only help them create their game with our real-time 3D platform, but how do we help them operate it to grow their user base through acquiring valuable customers? How do we give them the tools and analytics to segment and retain those valuable players? Delight those players through more specialized and individual gaming experiences. Obviously, with personalization from communication tools like voice and text chat through multiplayer backend suite. So I keep the developers at heart. We have 22.9 billion impressions we serve on our ad platform to help those developers acquire those valuable customers. And 2.4 billion unique players sitting on the ad platform every day so that we can help these developers do more, monetize, and grow their games. So that's what I'm doing, and I look forward to talking about our session here.
Super, thank you. And Brian, you're coming at this from a completely different direction, which is great to have the two of you together. So tell us a bit about your work.
Will, thank you very much. And Julie, a pleasure to be speaking with you and sharing this platform with you today. A little context of MIT Nano. So MIT Nano is a relatively new, just over a year old, a 200,000 square foot nano fabrication, nano characterization facility in the heart of MIT, right off of the main complex of MIT. Its mission, its mandate, is to enable all of MIT to do the work that they want to do. Most of the facility is dedicated to creating things at the nanoscale. The building is a controlled environment with temperature and humidity and vibration to allow us to fabricate things down to the micron or submicron level, to use semiconductor technologies to make new materials or new devices. We also have a lot of, in addition to the fabrication, a lot of characterization tools, allowing us to image things at the nanoscale. For example, we have a relatively new cryo-electron microscope that allows us to view the subcell walls in cellular structures with atom level resolution. Now, so what am I talking about gaming? So inside of MIT Nano as well, we have what's called the Immersion Lab. And the Immersion Lab is a facility dedicated to enabling the research at MIT, but also dedicated to enabling the research in MIT Nano to fabricate something at that nanoscale. You want to be able to visualize and maybe simulate it before you go into the fab. Or if I've imaged a molecule, I want to be able to visualize that molecule at a human scale. So the facilities of the Immersion Lab allow us to use the tools and the language and the technology of gaming to gamify research, to gamify our experimental processes, to ask what-if questions and training questions before we get into the lab. And at the same time, because of all the capabilities that we have, it allows us to develop new things, to develop new types of displays, new types of haptic or visual displays, and to use the data that is coming out of Nano to develop new types of algorithms for interaction. So that's maybe a little bit of a context, and happy to share with Julie and talk a little further.
I love how game technologies are sort of influencing all this other stuff. I mean, games are some of the most technologically advanced things that people build. I mean, there's so many innovations that have come out of gaming, and it's great that you're then taking that and doing cool new things with it. But first, let me come back to Julie. And as I mentioned earlier, gaming is riding a wave at the moment. More people are playing than ever. Maybe more people have discovered it than ever. And one thing that game makers and publishers often talk about is the community that grow around games. And I was interested to see a few examples during lockdown, while people were stuck at home and unable to socially interact in their normal venues, that people would flock to games and actually hang out in games. They became the go-to places for many people. We've seen events in games like Fortnite that have held music concerts and other social gatherings, and Animal Crossing. It was another very popular game in the last few months. That people were even organizing workshops and academic conferences where people went and interacted with their little Animal Crossing, which, for those of you who don't know, are little cute cartoon animals. It is as cute, no, cuter than it sounds. But people were doing academic conferences in these environments. And I think that's just really great. And I wondered if, Julie, what you think about this idea of community and new ways of socially interacting that games are allowing people.
Well, I certainly, I might start, Will, with the comment you made in the opening segment, which was, games is already a massive business. And so you have, billions of players across the globe pre-COVID enjoying the mediums. And what we saw with COVID, really the week that of March, I think it was 11th, when World Health Organization declared a global pandemic, what we started to see was just massive increase in the usage as well as new players. So I like to think about what happened to this big business with 2.5 billion global players or more, that all of a sudden saw a 46% increase in HD gameplay, HD meaning PC and console. So I call it this, the living room turning into the family game room. And even at a sample size of 1, I can tell you I'm quite challenged to play most console games. But inevitably, every day, my daughter's grabbing me for our Xbox session of Overcooked, where I seem to keep burning the soup. So, if we look back to 50 years ago, what our grandmothers were playing in Bridge Club has now become, the modern Bridge Club has become playing, Words with Friends with someone across the globe, this community event, as you talked about, the people coming together in a real world. I don't know if you all saw the launch of Mediatonic's Fall Guys, but you can dive into that multiplay with tens of thousands of players simultaneously across the globe racing in your fun game environment. So I think what we have is massive increase in time spent in the medium, and we have more new players who are thinking of their living room as their game room. And it's a way to connect and communicate. I mean, communication is a fundamental component of most games. Voice and text chat are a large part of how we feel part of the community we're playing with, whether we know them or not.
I just wanted to, maybe add there. Well, you're going to ask a question, but I was just sort of reflecting on this community. I'm struck by the way I like to describe why is MIT the way that it is, and why does it attract the best and the brightest in the world? And I think the reason that MIT has its unique flavor is that we have no space. We were sort of in this tight little urban campus in Cambridge, and we bring the best and the brightest, and we put them in this small space, and they interact shoulder to shoulder, and there's no barrier between the mechanical engineers and the chemical engineers and the computer scientists. And this cross-pollination of community that happens is something that typically happens on campus, but now we have to replace that. We have to figure out how to augment and not lose that piece. And gaming is certainly one way to do that. The tools of gaming are another way that I think allow that community aspect to continue to foster and to allow innovative ideas that take ideas from different domains and bring them together. So I think that's one of the reasons that I'm seeing just this massive trend of our students and our faculty looking at how do we use these tools to foster that community, particularly in this time, but prior to COVID as well.
Thanks. I mean, I guess it's no surprise in a sense that people are flocking to games and finding they're great places to hang out and interact. I mean, because virtual environments are by their design things that you interact with and interact with each other. And I wonder, Brian, if you could talk a bit about how you've taken that idea of immersion and interactivity within a 3D virtual space, and I think done something pretty cool with it from a sort of research perspective, made a new kind of research tool.
Yeah, so we have, there are a couple different things. Maybe I'll tell you a story first. We have a gentleman that works at MIT Nano who runs one of the characterization facilities. And he did his PhD research on a particular molecule. And he studied it, he imaged it, he analyzed it. But recently he came up to the Immersion lab and put on head-mounted displays and was able to step in at human scale into the molecule and see its physical structure, to see how things fit together. And it brought tears to his eyes, right? To sort of this thing that he studied for a half a decade of his life, to now be able to interact with it at the human scale. And sometimes that can provide insight to understand things that if it's very different to be staring things in a tiny little display versus to have things sort of wrapped around you and be able to physically interact with them. So we're developing tools that allow us to sort of do novel visualization, both in novel displays, but also how do we appropriately pipe in these novel data sets? Because if we look at data sets from microscopes or from medical imaging, to give that sort of to rapidly convey the physical context, the situational awareness that a doctor needs to understand an ultrasound exam or an MR, or the physical context of a molecule, which is typically beyond our capabilities, and to blow that up so I can visualize it, but then also to develop the haptic technologies that allow us to, if we're doing palpation, for example, and looking at the stiffness of a tumor versus a non-tumorous region of tissue, that stiffness, that relative stiffness, tells you something very much interesting about the disease state of a tumor, whether it's cancerous or non-cancerous. So being able to sort of both use all of our senses, the visual senses and our tactile senses, and maybe hearing and smell in the future, but to give those multi-dimensional ways of human interaction with our data.
So one question from the audience has just come in that sort of touches on this idea of virtual interacting in virtual spaces. With so much schooling gone online, I mean, what do you think realistically, practically now? What are the opportunities for this kind of virtual, hands-on but virtual interaction to be used for online education? Brian, to you.
There's many. I mean, I think one of the just to pick one. I mean, if we picked on physics, for example, you can have realistic physics models and realistic physical interactions of how the world behaves, and to potentially control the knobs on gravity and to control the knobs on the way that physics works, and to give that physical intuition for things that you can't currently do in the lab. You can't get into the lab right now and do these things. So being able to have the game engines that allow us to create those realistic, both the way that things look and the way that things behave, to provide that intuition that you want to provide to the student trying to learn a new topic. And then if we look at things like, we have a colleague that wants to use the Immersion lab and these tools to visualize quantum computing, where quantum computing is typically very hard to get your head wrapped around. If the equations can be quite opaque, but if I can step into a quantum bit, a qubit, and this is work being done by Will Oliver at MIT, and understand when I apply different magnetic fields, how does that quantum bit change? And if I can interact and visualize that thing without the equations, but having the equations drive how I see it and how it changes, that helps to convey the physical intuition that humans are really, really good at. That is a lot more opaque if you're truly trying to approach it through a system of equations.
Great, thank you. And we've got a lot of audience questions. I'm going to say right now, apologies to the audience, we're not going to get through all of these, but there was a question a few minutes ago about, if either you want to say anything about the use of games as training environments for AI agents, or indeed AI agents in games in general. But perhaps, Julie, we've also broadened that out. So, I know Unity, and I mentioned very briefly in your intro that Unity is used as a sort of virtual environment beyond games per se. I think you did a cool simulation recently about sort of infection in an interior, but maybe you could speak about that briefly and anything about AI agents in that context. And Brian, feel free to jump in on that topic too.
Well, yes. So I think for one, both of you commented that games have been this medium that has really pushed technology to the limits for decades, right? The real-time 3D nature of games, which is very real now elsewhere, has been a part of games that we all know for decades. So recently we ran a simulation through AI where Unity was the 3D spatial kind of representation of a grocery store. And again, we are not, this was not a medical research, but we were watching about contact tracing for COVID in a simulated event using real-time AI to track that. And that would be one example of where researchers, certainly in the medical field, have often used simulation to inform outcomes. And that would be an example of how Unity is. Now, on a day-to-day basis, we use AI training all the time to improve our outcomes for our game developers. Everything from the tuning of a game, think about something like a tutorial, right? Does Brian really need a 13-minute 3D walkthrough when he plays real-time, maybe he plays real-time strategy games all the time. So we're using these every day in games, and they just happen to be also applicable outside.
Brian, do you want to jump in?
I'd like to add that, I mean, there's certainly maybe the I won't call them the obvious, but the ability to, for example, visualize airflows associated with circulation systems and understand where you need to put additional filtration for COVID and eliminating COVID in airborne COVID in a room. But maybe taking it a different direction. Maybe I can mention the work of Fox Harrell here at MIT, who, if I paraphrase correctly, he's using avatars and simulated avatars to understand both the racial and maybe sort of sexual disparities in how people interact. And so he's able to create synthetic creatures that can reveal our biases and to study what sort of how people interact with each other and to do controlled experiments that you may not really be able to do using real people, right? Because you don't have the knobs of being able to suddenly get my skin darker or lighter or turn me from man to woman. But to be able to play with those tools to represent our virtual selves in very dynamic ways, to understand both what's the appropriate avatar for me, to make it so that I'm not feeling that I'm being biased against, or to make sure that other people aren't sort of interacting with me in a virtual community in a way that would be detrimental to my ability to learn. So that's a very different way of sort of using AI agents to do some very different types of research that I think is also extremely powerful and thought-provoking.
Yeah, both those examples are two examples that I didn't know so much about, but of course AI in games have gone hand in hand since people started working on AI. I mean, some of the first puzzles and tasks that researchers gave AI were to beat people in basic games. And of course, as AI's reached every milestone in chess and Go, gaming is the perfect testbed. And now we see with video games, many of which running Unity, games are being taught to play video games. And there's something about the richness of the challenge in games and the variety of the experience, coupled with the easy way to measure success. You're beating a score or beating an opponent, that means that AI and games go hand in hand, and I think will for some time to come. And then the big question is going to be, can we ever go, how do we take an AI beyond the game and actually make it do something useful in the real world? I think we're at that exciting cusp now, where the next few years are going to show whether the best game playing AIs are going to do really cool things that make an actual difference.
Are you saying that don't make a difference?
Well, sorry, say that again.
Are you saying that games don't make an actual difference? No, I'm just saying
games make a very big difference. I mean, none of us would be here otherwise. But
I think the exciting thing there is they make a difference, and maybe it's never going. The AI by itself, you always want the human in the loop. So I think the exciting thing is, how do you use the AI to both to inform or lead you along on a journey, and what's the interaction between something that is being done autonomously, but being contextualized and changed by how it's interacting by the person and what they're doing. So that's, it's that human aspect of the AI, which I think is really exciting.
Right. And there was just one last example of one company, DeepMind's trying to do this. I mean, DeepMind is well known for its work on AI in games, but they're now trying to take some of the ways they solve Go by squashing this vast search space into a manageable task, using those same techniques to do protein folding. When you take a protein and it can fold up in many different ways, and you need to know which one it is to understand its function. So that, I mean, they're doing that right now. This is the latest research in AI is inspired by games. So it's a very cool area, very cool crossover. Some yes/no questions. Will games or virtual spaces replace social networks as we know them today, Brian?
No, but they'll change them.
Okay. You tease. I want to go and ask why. But Julie.
Well, I have to steer clear of forward-looking, but I'm going to answer that question looking back. Without games, Facebook would still be an on-campus community, dating site. And games changed that platform to mainstream communities connected in, let's just say, Farmville, right? I mean, you had almost 100 million concurrent players, a time when Television was becoming asynchronous, not real time. This network effect of games as the water cooler moment started over a decade, maybe even 2 decades ago. I was just reflecting on, we launched Sims Online. I partnered with Luke Bartlett, who's now, runs the Unity's technology. And we launched Sims Online in 2000, 2001. There were like virtual weddings happening. I mean, so I liked Brian's question. I think it already has changed social networking, and that would be how I would answer that.
I should have mentioned at the beginning that, and congratulations to Unity has recently announced an IPO. That was what Julie meant, that she needs to avoid, forward-looking answers, and if that was a bit cryptic to people.
Thank you, Will.
So a question about the Unity is a platform on which many games are built and run nowadays. And some people may have seen in the news recently that Epic, another game publisher, is in a sort of tussle, a standoff with Apple and Google over sort of control of the App Store. So Epic's games need to go through the app stores, and they don't have the freedom that they quite like. So I just wanted, from your perspective, what's the best way to manage such a vast platform? What responsibilities? How do you manage the control with allowing your users to have some freedom to innovate?
So
Julie, sorry.
So I think at the end of the day, our guiding light is putting great tools in the hands of creators. The world is a better place with more creators in it. And the power of reaching consumers where they want is by nature a democratization move, right? So let's just go with Fortnite. I mean, think how many platforms Fortnite is played on. That in nature is the best way for content to remain king and to control their own destiny. So right now you build in Unity, you can be on, build in one code base, you're on 20 platforms across the globe. We think that is the best way to manage any platform, is to care about your player and deploy your content to reach your players wherever they are.
Okay, thank you. Another audience question. So technology from GPUs, which were a type of processor developed originally for graphics processing, have allowed AI to take off. And similarly, sort of technologies around VR emerged in gaming, and then have had applications elsewhere. Do you see anything else, Brian, sort of that's bubbling up in games that you're excited about, that you think might have that similar crossover?
Yes, but I would probably go maybe a little higher level. So GPUs allow you to do some of the processing and do it fast and do it efficiently, and those constantly get better, and algorithms allow you to do these things. I guess I'm particularly excited by the idea, and touching on what Julie said, of as humans, we communicate. We're social creatures, and we're really good. Some of us don't think we are, but we're really good at communicating with the spoken word and the written word. And if we're trying to communicate, the gaming tools give us another language with which to share our ideas, to communicate with our colleagues. And so I think if the long-term opportunity is that, hey, it's a new way to communicate. It's a new language. It's a common language that can potentially straddle the world, and it's not necessarily English or Russian or German or Spanish or Cantonese, but it's a language that allows us as humans, as social creatures, to communicate. So it's less about is it a particular 5G or GPUs? If Unity and game creators and the platform creators allow us to give the average person a new way to communicate. And that's what I'm excited by. It's not social media, it's not games. It's a new language, a new tool to allow us to efficiently communicate our ideas, to collaborate, and to share. So I think that's where I'm particularly excited.
Right. I'd love to build on that. You really hit on the human element of the communication, and then I'd like to go to the visual, right? So, what I'm excited about is the fact that we all live in a 3D world, and we watch film in a 2D. Most of, obviously, the Zoom experience that most of us are going through all day in our work. And so to be able to use these tools, so for instance, this October for Fashion Week in Paris, we're going to be using, Unity's 3D rendering platform in VR to really experience the Paris Fashion Show. So first of all, if you're into fashion, you never got to go to that show before. So some of this is actually is a wonderful opportunity for us to give greater exposure to the events that used to be kind of behind the VIP rope. And I'm really excited about seeing that impact our lives beyond gaming.
Yeah. And to add to that, I mean, to take it to another extreme, that's the social interaction. And there was an interesting article, I think it was in the New York Times, about people that were experiencing sort of a newfound social network because of they're being wheelchair bound, because everybody being now on Zoom, it was no longer a barrier to them going to this religious event or to this festive event. And so, expanding that now beyond just Zoom and being able to represent yourself as you choose to represent yourself in a three-dimensional world, enabled or not, I think is sort of another aspect of being able to experience sort of an artistic display, or just getting yourself out into the world in a way that everybody is getting themselves out into the world if you have limitations.
Yeah, that's interesting, Brian, because I think we've often talked about technology as like the divider, and maybe what we're actually seeing is the opposite, where it's leveling a playing field. Now, assuming you can obviously get access to internet and a device, but the level playing field, and I know there's a lot of questions around education. One of the places where Unity has been used is within medical hospital to actually do preparing for the work on a patient in a 3D real-time responsive way that you would have in essence with a real patient. So again and again, we're going to keep seeing these use cases creep away from games.
So on that note of games reaching more people, one of the audience has asked, what can game makers or publishers, I suppose, what more can they do to sort of push games into people who are usually not represented, or encourage global connectivity? Because I suppose the dominant gaming zones are the West and Asia. I mean, there are many places in the world that aren't so exposed. Are there things that we can do, that companies can do?
Well, I think often, and again, this is with the slant of maybe what I'm allowed to say, but I think sometimes we learn the best from our future by looking at our past. And great art, whether it's a painting or a book, which then evolved to radio, television, film, tell human stories, and people who are interested in those stories will reach that content. So I think what is interesting, video games are probably somewhere in the 40-year mark, and which is very early, when I just compared to those other art forms. And so I think what we should say is, as a consumer, have your voice, pick the content that engages you. Certainly with mobile, the global gaming audience is everywhere. Literally every country on the globe have players playing mobile, largely mobile, free to play. And so that would be my guidance, is that we're going to see interesting content across every group of humans as the category is able to deliver.
Okay, we've only got a few more minutes left, so I just want to do another quick rapid fire round. So answers limited to a maximum 10 seconds. You can even just say yes or no. Will 5G make much of a difference? Brian?
Yes, because it makes at least in terms of like headsets and displays, because you don't have to be wearing the thing anymore. You can be piping the data to just glasses as opposed to wearing the computer.
Cool. Julie?
Can't comment.
Another quick question. I mean, this can be tempting to sort of go off a whole tangent here, but will things like Neurolink and brain sort of interactive devices, will they make much difference, or is that a hype that's going to disappear? Brian?
Something will evolve. It's impossible to say what exactly, but there's enough work where people are looking at interesting ways to connect to a computer. What people are proposing now is probably not what will evolve to, but will there be novel ways to understand what we're thinking, to interface in some way? We're seeing that, yes, already, and that will continue. But anything like that will take time to sort of reach some kind of use state that makes sense.
Sure. Julie?
I can't go near that one.
Okay, with just a couple of minutes to go, one of the things I love, I love playing games. One of the things I love most is just learning about new games, recommendations, like, you've got to check this out. So I want each of you to tell the audience, one game that you really think we should all play, and why you think it's just such a brilliant example of this wonderful medium. Brian?
I just learned from Julie about Overcooked, and I can't. My father was a chef, and I can't burn water. So for me, that's the one that's I can't wait to play now that I've learned more about it.
Good. I'm gonna go.
You can't pick the same one.
I'll go with Fall Guys from Mediatonic. Here's why. First of all, when we think about massive multiplayer games, we really think hardcore games. Like it's one of those spaces I know I would be intimidated to go into. Fortnite, well, I have played Fortnite, but I would be intimidated to go into most, multiplayer PC console games. Fall Guys takes these really approachable, joyful characters and immerses us all in a race to accomplish with thousands of strangers. You literally feel yourself going on this journey for kind of simple tasks, and that's the one that's got me just captured right now. So I'm gonna go with that, because if it can get me and my 11-year-old, I feel like they've done something pretty special.
Oh, there you go.
And I would add the virtual Monopoly that my kids played over vacation. That was amazing to watch them actually play Monopoly on their phones with each other. That was phenomenal to watch.
Yeah. We've got to leave it there, I'm afraid. I mean, this is 40 minutes have flown by, but thank you so much, Julie, and thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. So this was the first, as I mentioned at the start, this is the first of a new series, Spotlight On. We have more coming up. We have 3 we can name now. The next one is on advanced manufacturing. We also have one on cybersecurity. Oh, beg your pardon. The next one is on CRISPR, and that's on the 16th of September. We then have one in advanced manufacturing and cybersecurity. And for the CRISPR one, we actually have CRISPR's co-creator, Jennifer Doudna. So you don't want to miss that. That's going to be really cool. To sign up for the broadcast links, I think we can get you in the chat a link to sign up to get more information on that. There on the screen. Magic in the background made that happen. Thank you. So sign up there for more information. And if you missed the URL for Unity's 19 takeaways from COVID and gaming, then we can get that to you if you sign up there as well. So thanks again for tuning in. And we will see you, one of my colleagues will see you next time. Bye-bye.